Good morning, Gyen Rinpoche, Tashi Delay, and good morning, Katrina. And welcome to everyone online. We'll begin this morning's session with some prayers. You'll find the link in the chat box. To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one that's gone, co-destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go forth. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and set out in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With your body's form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With a supreme sign, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a droplet through a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, o'erland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kandiri. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah.
第12件。
继续啊。
第2。
Oh yeah. Oh, 他可得少点的。我的。 내가 지종가 버친 비 송려를 봐. 신의 년주 매제 댕매 신승도 신의 가라서 교화 나 매체신의 교화가 시와르도 근데 그 신의 교화 심마디 녀와이다 던돌아서 봐 교화에 봐지 매교를 소소를 댕매 신스 댕체서 당하게 손이 교화매 신델리아 미크가 주방 교화 주중에 쳐야 붙여이 대버시라서 매삼사 교황아 마사베 티베토솔에 샤우돔체네 진이 차차와다 쳐봐 피와를 써봐 교황아 무사와이 삼사 수소 땡지 거로와 다 교치만 해서라도 계속 매삼사시 어딘데 땡게 매봐선 거라 로케게 매봐선 거라 신행에 좀 매게 땡매치 대인지 교군조 섬동에스다 내송 마지베체 내송이 지발에 교배하게 아니 네버데 술이 어르신나 소라 대인지 급 건조 섬동에서 산계 건조 최건조 견디 건조 섬동에 버려서 거라 대인지 급 건조 섬동에 대시 겸루신도 땜바다 대 랍전 냠밤에 버죠 대소자 겸견디 건조 섬고 쪽토 그래서 대소자 건조 섬이야 겸루데 땜보고 그래서 거도 대인지 급 건조 섬동에서 지구의 교바창게데 건조 섬동에 버마도 틸레션 지구의 경계시 교통계와 말해서 거라 대시 겸루신도 땜바 대소자 대졸이 겹선 로고래서 겹쳐고래서 랑경은 겹쳐 로 지시 겸루신도 땜보송 산계를 겹던 바보 철을 겹무 견디 겹주변 다조수 로 땜보송에 관해 아니 겹쳐고래서 거라 지시 겸루신도 땜바다 대 랍전 양반에 봐서 겹선 로아 삼김에 쳐봐 겹선 로아 랍자카래 산계를 겹선 로에 아니 산계가 람레 챈도 땡게 람 챈도 땡게 땜바샹리아 아니 이시메 쳐봐라 땜바샹 라온줄라 소바텐데 겹스 메치와들 철에 겹스 아니 심지어는 사업방발을 써봐라. 최대 경우에 봐. 근데 근들에 겹쳐서 와서도 겹주변 나쪽에 근들이 저거도 감이야다 쳐서 건조간데 쳐야고 치고도 좋아하는 텐데 제고 삼사 로바 깨졌지서 미국에서 어디 송교도 결합장 양반 매버차스 어야 대치가 그다.
So here, to begin with, as J. Lama Tsongkhapa has taught in his abbreviated Lam Rim, you are unsure about your birth in the unfortunate realms after death. So after we die, according to Buddhists, as we accept past and future lives, you are going to have to take a future rebirth. And without the sort of confidence that can come through practice, we don't have any kind of certainty, any kind of confidence that we are not going to be born in the lower realms as a hell being, a hungry ghost, or an animal. We can't necessarily have confidence thinking if we haven't, say, done practice like things like prostrations and offerings and so forth, and purified those kinds of negativities that we have committed in our past lives. That's the only way to sort of develop confidence. So it continues saying, and certain that the three jewels are the protectors from this terror. So we need to develop this kind of confidence, this kind of certainty in the three jewels as being that which can protect us from the lower realms, the only thing that can really protect us from the lower realms. And so it says, so make your practice of refuge firm, recognizing that really the only place that we can put our confidence or sort of put our trust in are the three jewels. There's no other sort of protector. There's no one else that can save us from the terror of that uncertainty about our future rebirth. And so here, to go for refuge means recognizing the Buddha as the teacher, the one who teaches the kind of precepts that we should follow, the Dharma as being the actual kind of protector, and the Sangha as being those sorts of friends or companions along the way, those that help us in our practice. And so in terms of what it is that are the precepts, this continues in this verse saying, so we should make our practice of refuge firm, stable, and not let the precepts of your refuge weaken. So to sort of take up the precepts, once we have put our confidence, our sense of protection in these three jewels, it means then that we follow certain precepts. Once we have taken refuge in the Buddha, for example, we don't seek out refuge or protection from other sorts of, say, worldly gods like Brahma and so forth. And as far as the sort of precept regarding the Dharma, we abandon harming other sentient beings. We engage in a way that accords with the Dharma. And going for refuge to the Sangha means looking to them as one's friends, as one's companions, those that you can ask questions to, those that are sort of your inspiration and those that you are trying to emulate. So in this way, one should have this kind of stable refuge based upon this sort of understanding in order to deal with that kind of terror of not having certainty about where we will be born after our death.
Oh yeah. 신행에 rum에지 때 신행에 rum에지 때 직접 군조 숨동에 제라 낭바전에 군조 숨샤고도 군조 숨샤야 될 거라서는 상만 지된 게 제법들이야 군조 숨에 원도잖아 근데 군조 숨 용신에요 말어 군조 지기서 그러마도 강가 숨게 숨매다지 용해요 말도 근데 말어 낭바전에 군조 써야 돼 대인지교 군조 숨동에서 겹던 법칙 다르신 바랑을 냠요 영경이 겹던 법 즉 산제로와 겹던 법 근데 저 거마도 저 겹던 법면은 소소랑도 지신도 마도 겹던 법 산제스 겹무에 쳐서 되게 송배 쳐대 소소 두개 들어와 겹주변 다 줘서 숨도와 저저 겹던 법 산제레스 산제기 겹던 법 송네 산제기 겹던 법 나시 아니 게 쳐도 조금이 설치라 긴데요 산제 때문에 쳐도 주로게 저 정보 충분히바 미비하다 싶을 긴디고 저 최신다 좀 get어줘야 최신들 누구도 땡기는 삼타체 봐 당원의 최근저대란 게 소소 냠설해야 되라 소소 제고야 돼 뒤쪽들에도 경무에 돼 최근적인 있어도 저도 그 산제게 급수대 군조섬을 이쪽으로 했으니까 군조섬 로스 샤트는 대결한 제시로 주세 제바보글이야 이시전에 겸로단테 내시려면도 대칸들에서는 겹등바보 산제시 겹주변다로 근데체 경문에대 최대로와 다 산제다 최다 근데기 겹수대 간들에서 간데스 겹고여서나 대산제라니 속도와 시베 송의 죄제람 내니 계좌 남라대에서 시베 코아기 동해 죄제가 남가된 가랑그 냠선용의 신의 풍성도 ken지세네 니 견조를 셰여 송거라 대신식 받던 바대에서 대신식 받게 랑그 냠선용의 최대 샤라 셰야데 마도 아니 바 똑배 연대주도 바 진시하고 직실로 보여한다고 텐데 메도 송거라 대결하지 터바체 삼바체 냠술라네 소소에 제고를 해서 거다. 집에서는 조절로 내니 계좌 남라대 대신식 받던 바대 계좌 남기 자고서 산재 겹던 바버레세 되네시 카메라도 쳐서도 긴들이 겹주베자 나로레스 낭벨로 직전기 제바보 상마 로이용원도 단 고소해 그치 동바대다 누마서
단다 고기도.
그셔간도서
인터넷 디스 약국에서
고소해.
말을 단다 고기.
아야 여기 때 한번 먹고 있어 나 내가 먹어도 돼 바르데시 돼서 고소 고마서
단다 고기.
가르쳐다.
Internet tis chaparwa. Yeah, tanda kogi. Internet tis dukcha yesar.
다시 해 고도 겁니다. 된다.
Shedu kogi.
아니 되잖아. 그래.
No. So here, as this verse by Jelama Tsongkhapa says,
대해서 parte 구경하지. 맞아 됐어.
as it says here in this verse by Jelama Tsongkhapa, you are unsure about your rebirth or about your birth in the unfortunate realms after death, and certain that the three jewels are the protectors from this terror. So for Buddhists, this kind of the three jewels are the certain kind of protector. These are really the only refuge from the kind of terror of continued rebirth within samsara. And so here it's not like those sorts of theistic religions where there is some kind of single protector, single deity, or someone that one would go to seeking out protection, like asking for some sort kind of protection from them. But here, the Buddhas, the way in which the three jewels act as our refuge, act as our protectors, is the Buddha is the one who teaches the Dharma. Without them, without the teachings of the Buddha, we can't protect ourselves. But the instructions, the Dharma that the Buddha teaches is the actual refuge. Our own practice is really what protects us from the kind of terror of, say, uncertainty about our future rebirth. And then those that act accordingly, the Sangha, those are like our sort of guides or our inspiration, our companions upon the path. And so in this way, having this kind of confidence, making our practice of refuge firm, means relying on the three jewels in this way of seeing that the Dharma, our own practice, is really that which is the actual refuge. We can't sort of place our confidence in another being, a creator, or someone else who we can just make supplication to and they will then protect us. But rather it is basically up to us, as the Buddha himself has explained in a sutra, that he teaches the kind of path that cuts the misery of samsara, but it is up to us to actually put it into practice. The path that extricates us from the sufferings of samsara, the Tathagata has given us this path, has taught this path, but the Buddha can't transfer his realizations to others, can't give those realizations to others. Rather, we have to do for ourselves. It is by implementing the teachings of the Buddha that we are able to go for refuge, or really protect ourselves. So here, again, as this verse by Jelama Tsongkhapa has said, we should in this way recognize that the way in which the three jewels are a source of protection is by our own implementation of those practices, seeing the Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma as the actual refuge, and the Sangha as those kinds of companions or guides along the way, whose behavior we want to follow and try to emulate ourselves.
야. 대순자 가서 그래. 지난해 그 지된 제바보 개원도 제바에는 군주도 캡틴 바보 멤버셔로 제바보 인베 원도 제바에는 그 지금도 용식 말아 캡틴 바보 가서래 제바보 지금도 용식 말아. 나이는 아주 제바본데 게 좋으네요. 소소소로기 제바보를 로스인데 그라. 소소로기 줄로 소소로기 제바보 되게 제바에는 지된 용도게 니주진 지된 상마 공개 로이요한것도 다네 제고라 걔네 줄로 셴다도 저 공개 로이요한것도 다네 제고라 걔네 상마 군조 공부 그 전에 쭉 그라 걔네 상마라 그 셰프체 공개 상마 군조게 저버려 섬 켈링 공개를 쇼라 걔네 디켈링 반도 소스 지바부치 여버체 셴다 줄로디 야베 미팅 받아보지 다르지 알람다 자기서로 성게 마음도 대상가로 지나 줄로 아직 질이야 나 그때 요마셔르시라 지게 제바 응원에 켈링게나 지난 제바 소소 제바 보도 서로 봐줘 줄로티야 공부 여네 공부 좀 봐라 공부 나와요라 나 뒤는 알아줘네 그저 깔 공부를 지시티 켈링 거라 근데 맨도 하셔서 제바부 지마도 요 말이야. 줄로 써서서 제바부 메다 저르샤나. 근데 상마 제바부 레그 말도 어디인데 다단던 게 시에 가르쳐서나 군조 숨동에서 군조 숨셔야 돼. 낭배니 때문에 털도 로 산제 군조 되어요. 산제 샤게토 버치부 말을 산제 장매번 되어요. 산제 장매번 지대 감려요. 네. 남바가 따오데 나라조야 산제 토비야 해버치. 산제 좀 된대야 당분 나라조나 시체 아니야 추트니야 상보다 신기인데 야 사우르 전에 탈심바 요래레스. 다들 남가데 나줄 때는 나라조야 산제야 여봐. 동일에 타로시야 여봐. 나줄 규기 시럽데 시럽 탈심바. 랑도르지네 탐지 신경이 시럽을 규기 여봐. 나중에 삼바대 삼바상보 다음에 신제 버세라베 소설의 신계치와 신계 전다 주에도 소설 전다 이 삼사 어떤데 탑대 시럽이 삼보 같이 뭐 요리에 여버지 이치체는 티치기도 말아도 다바르시 과코르제테 아니 건조 지된 제바 볼이야 소아다 없이 땡기지 마로 남바체나 말아도 산계처럼 제바나 신지 술럽기 야 루트가 지금에서 전에 전에 겸루도와 겹tem바보 산게 겹다 주변다도 근데 경무대 최세 아예 전에야 렘지 산게 조금만 더 지금에서 남배다 어디라 심지어 탐제를 산게 그러기 위해서라 산게 탐제 처음에 보여야 돼서 강가 담봉 내 산게 시요 말은 남배로라 깔래 겸이야 산게 우르마도 랑신기 랑중게 산계지 요마르도 어제도 나라조 산계지요바 어디 자네 군조성을 겹선로 치등에 중나되는 시치기에서 어디 연구도 야
So here, when it comes to sort of generally, when you have a religion that posits a creator kind of a deity, some sort of single creator, whoever it may be, and each individual sort of theistic system has its own creator that it asserts. So if it is the case, as these various traditions assert, that an individual creator made everything, made all of the world, then that creator must too, whoever is posited in that particular system, have created these other religions. And so it would seem then that it would be logical to have respect for all of those different traditions if they are all preceded by the sort of intention of that kind of creator. Then it would be the case that each tradition would have respect for the others, recognizing that it too is a product of the kind of intention or thought of that creator. But that's really not the case. We see that there are sort of discord and fighting among these different systems and a lack of respect. Whereas when it comes to sort of if you are really following that the creator created all of those things, one should have respect for all of it. As opposed to that, the Buddhist system would say that there is no sort of single creator, and there isn't even just one single Buddha. Finding certainty, again, in the three jewels as the protectors from the terror of the lower realms and the terrors of samsara, Buddhists assert that there have not just been the one historical Buddha Shakyamuni, but there are actually countless Buddhas. In fact, each of us has the potential to become a Buddha ourselves. By following the kind of teachings that the Buddha has given, we too have the potential to be able to develop the kind of wisdom that we already have within our continuum to its fullest potential, to become fully enlightened Buddhas. And so it is based upon our own kind of training in certain qualities, like valuing others more than ourselves, by developing our method and as well as our own wisdom and bringing them to their culmination, bringing them to their completion. We too are able to become Buddhas. So here it is the case that the Buddha began just like us and traversed the same kind of path, and based upon his own experience then gave teachings. So we too, if we sequentially train in those various trainings, have the ability, have the capacity to become Buddhas. It's asserted asserted that all sentient beings have this sort of Buddha nature, have the capacity or the ability, and it's really dependent upon their own effort that then they can become fully enlightened Buddhas. So this is the kind of understanding of the nature of the three jewels of refuge, how they actually act to protect us, and our own sort of capacity, such that we gain a kind of sense of going for refuge really means engaging in the trainings ourselves, following after that same path that the Buddha has taken in order to be our own kind of protector.
Oh yeah. Oh, then it carsore. Tichi Camdu Shindu Tembata, Te Lapson Yamba Meba Sierra. Tichi Camdu Shindu. The Tadan the Mashilop Saswa. Tachidanko Nambachan Sanje, Kankusay and Dekunde Kibutang Meba Yordo. Sanje Shagatuba Chibumare, Tanda Sanje Shagatubade, Zamulin de la Pene, Sanje and Japan Zangende, Chusune, Tanda Congo Chune, the Yuzan and the Tanda Sanje Shagatuba, so Cheshire Ordo. Mado Chitan Sanjelia Tramebare. Gamne Tartuba Tramebare. Tina Gamne Kandachina, Sanjichum Dendina, Shanda Kandachina, Chebabu Kelling Marmado, Gamne Kunjo Kemeli Batindemara, Kunjo Yore, Tarchim Bekibu Mambu Yore. Ina te Chebabu, so Kurangi, Chebabu Imbashi, Kulunguangis, Nishukin Chitan Kangasumado Rang, Kwako. Then to understand the sort of chamber or the telling your mara. Oh, the member Chene, Casora, Sosoya, Duration, Sanjeta, Topacone, Conde Penetina, Gurju, Samatan, came to Chigorno. They came to Lapsale, they Lapsan Yamba Mebasa, Lapsan Mangu or Tanga de Shemagoche, Sanjeli, Captain Bobo Sonde. Did Cagali in the Temple Mambu or not Captain Babu, Tensha Mambu. Tinane Sanjeli capture Yense, and Chandal kept Messuas Kugadon. And Chile kept the song and in the Casare, Simjan let Sawabang Bas. Chile kept son the Simjan let Sawabang. Sawabang and getting Alia, never Pamba Chibu Sigumare, temperature battery and Sawabang Bandu. The Tanda Chotam the two dish and Sawabang Badal do. Donation in Mesevas, Dina Sunguda, Shikebekos. Donation in Meseva Tishiba Nam Yusons, so Dotishana, she said, Simjan saw Mecheba. Pemba Drubateta, saw Mech Pemba Drubate, saw Mebanaldoro, Pendochigora, saw Chigio Marva. Donation in Meseva Tishiba Nam Yusons. Tungin Yang Devate, anything Bashiko Soda. And it's chick the caressida. When the Coban to real Tondalia, saw Pompe Shuticha. Nearly Tarbe Coban to Retelia, Tombani Congore, Songara. Donation in Messotishuanas. Tungin Yang and Debadis, Tombani Comete, Nemo Leonson Dania, Tungetam Jelioson Debe, Tabratoya Tabdi, Tombani Congore, Songara. So I met some Sambusam Jidigbaris. Shirabisha the course. Tungin Yang and Debad. Then it in Bashikosa. Or the church at the near there. Chingon do Lamiko one person so was it to be a church you are. She did Dumeli attend to Tarba. Randa Shan Tamja Dumeli Tarba to see Tapsioti, and it don't want you to be shirab the rest. And that Tab Cabarja Chambani Chanzuki Samla Soba. Shirab Cabarja Tombani Tobala Soba. The Nil Tembe. Lamde Combalitan any outro Cuyordo. Yeah, teaches me.
So here, again, this verse reads, so make your practice of refuge firm and let not the precepts of your refuge weaken. So again, it is dependent upon our own kind of understanding and our own sort of practice that we are able to find refuge. So again, there is a Buddha, a being who has removed all faults and developed all good qualities. This Buddha Shakyamuni, who came and taught the Dharma, and his teachings still remain. And so we sort of center or make central Buddha Shakyamuni, but he is not the only Buddha by any means. There are countless Buddhas. There are countless beings who have perfected their wisdom and methods such that they have removed all faults and developed all good qualities, but no one made them that way. It wasn't sort of created by this kind of creator a deity, and nor was our suffering or our cycling within samsara the sort of result of a creator deity. So neither our freedom nor our cycling or being in this kind of situation of samsara are due to the kind of intention of some kind of creator. So again, the Buddha is a refuge not in being able to just directly remove our suffering or give us happiness, but rather the Buddha is the teacher. It is by seeking protection in the instructions, the precepts, the teachings that he gives, that we ourselves are able to be freed from, again, the kind of sufferings of the lower realms and attain a sort of liberation. So here, again, to sort of the precepts that are related to going for refuge are many. We won't go through all of them. But again, the Buddha, seeing the Buddha as the teacher means that we're not going to seek out any other kind of teacher, any other sort of protection. Again, in India, there would have been many different types of teachers, but accepting the teachings of the Buddha as being the real sort of truth. And then based upon that, we engage with the Dharma. And the main precept of the Dharma is to abandon harming others. Now here, it's not just about like not harming, but really encompassing that idea of bringing benefit to others. So here there is a verse from Aryadeva's 400 verses in which he sort of summarizes the Dharma, what it contains, saying that it's really about not harming others, which includes wanting to benefit them. And then there's a side of emptiness that brings nirvana, that brings this kind of definite goodness of freedom from samsara. And there's no Dharma other than those two. So here, in order to be able to protect ourselves from the lower realms, there is that kind of Dharma of not harming others, of engaging in beneficial activities such that we avoid any kind of rebirth in the lower realms. And then there is the sort of wisdom, the development of an understanding of emptiness, which can bring liberation, which can bring freedom from samsara, that kind of level of definite good where we are able to pass beyond all of our suffering and all of our afflictions and so forth. But really, essentially, the basic precepts of the Dharma are these two. Here it is this, on one hand, the side of non-harm, of bringing benefit to others, that method side, the sort of special methods include things like love and compassion and so forth, as well as the kind of emptiness side, that wisdom by which we are able to be completely freed and attain the definite goodness of liberation.
Oh yeah. That they can live some night. Long dur sushi to rale so sungutwa. Oh, the indico. And that so this social rale grace. They are carnal lesson. Nabule said the Tibumigiwa. Roa. Shanla Severus Giva. Tam Migiwata. This also got no Nabule. Carville the Giva. Julia Soba, this was some good on the champagne, you change with some less over. Go a yard so much such over. Oh, the cardinal and their leg someness. Le Maison Soba Kitchi to make Kitchi, Nagule Kankayimba. They are both Shimpache, did super pang. And you Carville Kawakarim, but they are with Shimpache, Sanji Son Shabe. There's a ready in the part troop. What and Tanda ngazu susu kyo nari pangi yuna ti pang pati ta yunde nari kiri yuna ko kye pati nye ane ya saru tani yarje konde ya pene ane tarwa togu yora ngandu lami koba ti togu re tarwa ti togu re sanji koba ti togu yora o ti ya kana lende le samne landu tsushi chubla ra le sa nagwe le de ka Kwa Kichi Kunaguleta, Yamola Soba Tezupa Rimji, Yorta, Nekiva Kivelerwa, Shenji Sokovala Soba, or Tezuya, Kone Konduape, Chambani, Chanju Simla Soba, Shembegasim, or teaching Tandanga Razoliebe, Kianaripa, Yadenaria Kibati, Kone Kondia Sane, any Kone Kondia Pene, and Mondo lami koma tarba tamje kemba tobe koma bato ya truto che gures ke so le rale gres ke sungdo ya kana le de lesam ne langdur chushi tubla rale so langdo che bato le rale gres ken dona la mabu sungdo 당이 다긴 거에 대해 수신 건데 so 좀 견데 che gure da sungdo 마도 현대지 쪽으로 삼야로 계셔지고 좀 주는데 쪽으로 와 수이나 대토에 매도 소소라래 그래서 저 당이 다근 거에 대해 수신 건데 주르시 내가 nemba 제발 당이 다가 방법이스 소소소소 방법 제도 봐서 네 레데 야고 지금도 왔음 어디 야고 제소 사사테 방법 미지요나 네 그런 데리야 내가 상부 전부도 nemba 제도고 마도 거 따된 게 지요나 소소 방법 소소 제고를 산다 단계 그거 말을 선거야라 어딘지 가서 당이 다근 거에 현대 수신 건데 내 당년바 제발 당이 다그 방법이었어 지수야 대치 손 산들
So the main point here, as the verse continues, is that this depends, this kind of refuge depends on the correct practice of actions to be adopted or discarded. So by considering well the causality of black and white karmas. So here, this really means that our finding refuge, finding protection in the three jewels is mainly dependent upon us. Abandoning by considering the kind of correct practice of those actions that we should abandon. Any type of action that is harmful to others, that is negative, is something that is a black kind of karma. That is something that we should give up and make an effort not to do. And any type of white or positive actions are those that we should adopt. Things like love and compassion and bodhicitta and so forth. We are trying to develop those such that they are perfected or brought to their culmination. And so this really depends upon our considering the causality of black and white karmas. What are the causes of our suffering? What brings about our suffering? And what are those kinds of positive actions that we want to accomplish? And once we have that kind of knowledge, we have to make the effort for ourselves to take each good kind of quality, each good positive thing, and develop that to its fullest. And every sort of negative quality we try to get rid of, anything that's going to lead to a kind of bad cause in the future. So it is based upon our own understanding of what are the kind of causes that will lead to a good rebirth as a human or a god, and what are the causes of negative rebirths, and are actually putting them into practice that we can really find refuge. That is where we find our protection. And we have to traverse this path ourselves. Again, this is really dependent upon you. It's not like a kind of system where one can rely upon a creator or look to someone else for protection. But as the Buddha has said in the sutras, the famously quoted verse, that you are your own sort of master or protector. We can't just place our confidence in another being to protect us or to give us some kind of realizations or protection, but rather it's dependent upon us, dependent upon our own actions, the good and bad that we have done, that we are going to experience good and bad results. So as this verse continues, it says, again, that as for the good and bad actions that we commit, we are our own witness. Like if we're doing some kind of work and someone is watching over us and they see whether we're making mistakes or not, we're probably going to be very careful to not make any sort of mistakes. And so too, we really are our primary witness as to those good and bad, those positive and negative actions that we do. We need to be the witness for ourselves in order to ensure that we are going to have good results. So here, the sort of manner of refuge is by really thinking about our own practice of actions. What are we doing in terms of adopting and abandoning certain actions? And we do so based upon an understanding of causality, of black and white karmas.
Oh yeah, that 신의 연주 매제 된 매제서 당하란도 로아 천디자 마임바 교와 치마 편제 된다 시안라 소아 방아 진내지 펜바 주베고네 교와 치마 내손을 깨지 교가 온도라다 미 톱지기 교교와 주도 주 아니 교와 통만 매번에 사샹겐게 싹베로아 너네 미교와라 소바테서 랑게 단데 메전베 세메바 마부사요도 대수 강가를 줘봐체 ane jambada niji chanju samla soba ada o tendre komne tikba de tayak tapsi che kyo ngamada chendele sabe tikba tagbe chedo simjen la pembe chamba chawa soba komne ane cha chawa cheba pyo la soba kyo la chene o da kyo chima lada me sola majene lada meli kyo chi peche yongri sam so tenke bache 가르생에 내손에 깨지 교강가 봐 하다 몇 깨지 교만부 싸워 인삼사 다 될 때네 교시만 내손에 되게 그 말을 하다 며칠 교 독일에 삼사 소소소소 땡터 버치고 가라 땡터 버치 대사 많이 봐 땡주 하다 몇 교 교네 교디 교네 교 교네 니 차당을 쏴봐라 박초단 현조 공조당 아제 차도를 써봐 녀모 반에 네 동해에 땐도 타르바치기 삼상 야 라치부 동해에 타르바사 마임바 천디 판매 선배 로와 심진 신 남자 심진 탐제 심진을 캡러매봐 심진 컨디지나야 대원들의 동해 medebe 심진 컨디지나 대수 상모 탐제 동해에 타르바 탑치기 삼 대체도네 산제제 고반 토바치기 삼상 다그 신지베 자주 셈 공내로와 내 산지 고반 토바적인 섬 대체도 전행의 섬자 그런세 때문에 선발 쇼쇼 누르
So as this verse begins, you are unsure about your birth in the fortunate realms after death. We can't necessarily have confidence about where we will be reborn after we die. However, if we make an effort to stop the kind of causes of a bad rebirth by abandoning negative actions and also addressing those kinds of negativities, those kinds of non-virtues that we have accumulated in countless past lives, if we generate regret and make effort at purification, as well as effort at developing those kinds of positive, virtuous qualities, making effort at every virtuous action and things like love and compassion and bodhicitta and so forth, we can have the kind of confidence, we can gain a kind of certainty that we will not be born in the lower realms, knowing that we have addressed those kinds of causes by purifying our negativities and accumulating positive actions. We can have certainty that we are going to be able to gain a good rebirth as a human or a god, and in that rebirth be able to then continue to practice. But again, we should think that there's just gaining that kind of good rebirth in the future is not enough. But so long as we have this sense of like I and mine, self and other, that we're going to continue to have to take rebirth within samsara. And so it's worth making an effort to try to get freed from that kind of attachment to oneself, this sort of grasping at a self that leads us to have that kind of attachment and aversion. And so too, we look then at other sentient beings and think that it's not just our own kind of freedom that we want to gain, but looking at all of these other sentient beings, these beings that have acted as mothers and fathers, they too should be freed from this kind of situation of suffering. Every single being, from the smallest bug, is such that they don't want to have to suffer even in the slightest, and they want to have happiness. And kind of looking at that situation, we should think that for the sake of being able to gain this state of Buddhahood, wherein I'm able to fully benefit these other suffering sentient beings, I'm now going to listen to the Dharma and put it into practice as much as I am able for that kind of purpose. So please set a good motivation then for listening to the teachings.
Oh yeah. Mutanga de Truido, yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, let's talk about the what to send Russian video. Oh, that do the two science at him,
No.
do the two science at him. That under Kondong as the J, Tenjin Japan said to Mambushemba. Oh, that Tenjin Japan, the Mashita, the Mambushem. Tenjin Japan said Sheduza. Judan Kela Tenjin Japan till the Chashi never sonza simje 동해제 나로다 잠바다 인지 장주 semla서 탑지 차도서 연구여라 어제네 tenjin 대반 중앙 sonza 랑원에 주바 동바레에서 최가리나 랑와도 주베 동바대 연구여라 저 탑대 실험 얘가 돼 되게 주고여다 어디 조신 구여다 tenjin rebar junga soda ko tunghe yore tunghe gen narwa yore tenjin rebar junga semje yore tenjin rebar junga sanje yore rawa 이상 거 semje tunghe da trendu hinji chenpo chamba zawa chanju semla soba tezo komku gurese punzu tembala tembalam ji chodera utina she tenji rebar junga sonza chö karina rawando drubachi yo mara rangingo ne koran chipge 조조 서여버려 진디 예시 찍을 문진 지야시오 말아 마잉게 다시 망부실 때는 르파 따네 대주 내가 제베들 따글라가 제버려 뒤르시 근데 때는 딱 벗으면 샤고도 뒤주도 단단 뭐 동이 또 별로 되고도 탑신이데 두에 셔들 때진 레버는 중하데 텐데 예배 라완도 주베 동버를 라완도 주베 동버서 때진 레버는 중에 수지여 버려시 어디 망부셔서 야 뒤지소냐
No. So here, to pick up in the text, we will be starting from page 22, another way of establishing dependence. And here we have gone through so far how it is that, say, composite phenomena are dependently originated. Now here, when it comes to what dependent origination establishes, it actually helps us to sort of establish the method side, how it is that we are able to develop attitudes like love and compassion. What are the causes of suffering, and what is the sort of afflicted suffering that comes from that? So the kind of presentation of causally dependent phenomena, or things that arise due to dependent origination or dependently originated, this helps us to develop the method side of the path by looking at the kind of suffering situation of sentient beings and wanting to get them out of that, and also in order to develop love and compassion and so forth. This understanding of dependent origination helps establish that method side. But it also is important, is critical in terms of the wisdom side of the path, in that whatever is established dependently doesn't have some kind of autonomous existence from its own side. Phenomena are merely dependently designated, merely dependently originated. And so it is this understanding of dependent origination that actually helps us to develop the wisdom side as well, the wisdom understanding that things lack this kind of inherent existence or this kind of sort of autonomous existence from their own side. So here, when it comes to dependent origination, it's sort of indispensable for both the method and the wisdom side of the path.
Oh yeah, 다 뚜르기 출신이시더라. 해진 제바 보임번에 해진 출신이시다. 니마 자방 명다들이와 살로서 때문에 부조선의 해진 스타셔거라. 저기 진버부터 땅에 겨만 보사네 부지했던 달이라. 아니 텐데션 총선아 아니야. 출신세를 명다수여라. 되서라. 다 다시 tendu 가리는 명태다 돼서. 해진 제바 보임번에 그 내가 가르 제바 보이나. 신송계를 지나다, 남주 송계를 지나다, 매당계를 지나다, 멤버시나다 가리나서라. 이제 제바 보인반에 레알 때네. 자와 강보 송계를 강보 소신구라. 강보 소에 자와 될 때네 그 강소 아래에서 강소와 송자한테는 지기질 때네 자와 될 때네 제바 보샤 제바도 보더니 자와도 샤고를 해서라. 신주바보르지네 신주바보스 제제 신주네 대제기가 거신 자와를 때네 제바보샤고레스 펜지 자와다 제바보니 지실 때네 제바보차그레 자와차그레스 와라 제바보 매버지 자와용마로 자와마전이 제바보 중심마도 내게 제바보 등일할 때네 줍지서 자와들스 와라 대 제바보를 때네 줍그레스 딜레 셴베 랑기 ngoyu tube tabshen melase cheba bosido ko chala matune rawadu tubara chida tende yo mares ora tene tuba mato rawadu tube sushen yo mares chebo lela tenje shes de tsawashiro ko songdo cheba bode lela tene tenjen de ne cheba bochagres rawadu tube cheba bochi yo mares 레자 제보 땡일라 때는 좀 말을 레야 제보 벌을 때네 네 자가 레스 자그마도 라와도 두바치 요 말에서 거라 두베큐네 마통고 텔레션도 두베큐 요 말에서 거라 체메 마통아래서 거라 Oh, yeah, teach some, yeah.
So here, beginning with another way of establishing dependence, it starts with Devadatta. Being a doer of an action is established in dependence upon the action he performs. Now here, Devadatta is a common name that is used, and it actually means sort of like given by the gods. So someone, if they sort of made prayers to receive a child and had a child, maybe they would give them this name, like given by God, but it could be any name. We don't need to have it be Devadatta. It could be Tashi or Tundrup or an even English name. But being the doer of an action is established in dependence upon the action that he performs. So when we think about someone, say, who is doing any kind of work, whether they're building a house or doing some sort of carpentry or any kind of like making medicine, whatever sort of action someone is doing, to posit that action or to posit them as an agent, these are mutually dependent. You can't posit a doer without a deed or an actor without an action. So the action is also established in dependence upon the doer. So you cannot posit some sort of a doer or an action that is autonomously established from their own side, but rather the deed is dependent upon the doer, and the doer is so too dependent upon the deed. There's no way to posit one of these as existing from their own side. So here, as the fundamental verses on the middle way by Nagarjuna says, the doer depends on the action. The action is dependent on the doer. Except for arising dependently, there is no other way that they are established. So again, whatever kind of action it might be, someone is building a house. You can't talk about the action of building a house without someone doing that action. So too, the sort of actor, someone acting as a doer, is dependent upon them engaging in a particular act. So these things are mutually dependent or mutually established. There's no way for them to, either of them, a doer or a deed, to be established autonomously or from their own side.
Oh, yeah. 대신도 양라다 양라 전수도 양라스는 강버르진의 고다 개군 찍바다 사바 토다치 강배 차시만 보여라 대졸이 양라스로 양라 전수도 강버들스라 소바들스 양라다 양라전 또 차다 차전스 그래 차전스도 강배 양라 도졸이 차스체 차전스도 강버들 차전스라 양라다 양라전 차다 차전스라 대신도 양라다 양라전당세 차다 체전을 써봐서 세마다 셰자 유대 똑베 세마 아니 세메 셰자서 세마서 세메 셰자 세마다 셰자니 지실을 뜨는 샤고로마도 세마매나 셰셰세주 샤용마도 셰어를 자와지요나 아니 세마샤도로 세마다 셰자 계제다 계제 규딜의 계제로와 계제들은 제부스로 하시 제부대 규지요네 그 제부샤고라 제부지요네 규샤고로도 마도 시안을 때바 메고시 라와도 주베 대용 말해서 주베 수기 주베요 말해서 계제를 써봐 계제를 써서 자실을 써봐 오메슈남서 대도 사마데 랑근고에 주바 말해서 편지 때니 주바 샤지 탐제 편지 때니 주바 바시르 송고라 때니 샤베 tinju도 텐도스 오야 티지
No. So here, when it comes to the existence of things like the whole and its parts, there are sort of different terms that are used here, but we could talk about like the branches of something, but usually in English we would use parts, but sort of like if you have like a house and the house is something that is made of all of these various parts, like the walls and the doors and the windows and so forth, these kinds of things. So sorry, the English and the Tibetan go in a slightly different order, but likewise, Madhyamaka texts, such as the fundamental verses, refute essential existence with respect to parts and wholes, objects of cognition and valid cognitions, producers and products, and so on. So again, there can't be, when it comes to like a whole, something that possesses parts, it can't essentially exist apart from those parts. Or two, an object of cognition. We can't have a existence of a
That's
valid cognition without its object
right.
of cognition. So these things are mutually or interdependently posited. So these texts, like fundamental verses by Nagarjuna, it essentially show us that there is no way to posit anything like something that is produced, a producer and product, the cause and effect, the parts and the wholes, an object of cognition and its a valid cognition of that. None of these can be posited as independent. They then reveal these things to be dependent arisings that are posited as interdependent or mutually dependent.
Oh yeah. Pari surita busedo. Ta rinrechene ripajo de longbacha sujo de richa longbachuna. Ani social de pajo de parisigra. Pajo metodo ngajo desa ridelia surisigra. Ya pajo sujo sera. Rirechene ta pari surisjara. Rimena ko pajo se sujo se sigra. Suru soso se de sujo se. Pagi pajo de sigra. Pari surita buseyora. Pari la tene surita, surila tene pari jojines. Yeba yimbe penzu teme do mela. Pari sede kadu ina pari si yomato. Narzo de denge richi, pajo de richi ne pigi pari islabgira. Kuranzo piga denge dege suri sianganzo yose ridil pari islabgira. Sako dosa tujungu tuku yormato pari sidu rawandu trubachi yone sutena pari la pari samsa tangura. Ti tengi medwa. Suri de ganzo yose ridi rawando drube suri chene ko sutena suri samgur te samgu medwa pajo tengi de suri samgi ora sa tu drube so lo tagdang ki khaba chikchil to ni chubdang khaba che drugu armado tachi do de yes che chi koran rawando drune sutu ye che yo mare songu ora tanye jong pa sha ne chokbar sil ten ani samurdan pa sha te sam ko sha ye de ordo pari suritabu, pari la tene surita, surila tene, pari yoba yin jinse, penzu teme do melas, raba tene shi shar, lo no changsana, sosu nima shasa choden di shar rwa, pajo den roni ya no choden rwa ko, tachi do shari di kadine shacho deg marwa, di shacho yinse nima shasa choden yoba chera, tene ko pajo de tene, ko no choli ora, Dishone tene shacho sira, pajo tene nupcho dendura. Zako cho sine, shacho lojo sine, pajo desa deli tene shana, shacho tachi du shacho yengechi chiye yo mara, tachi du nupcho yengechi yo mara, chancho lojo se su kawaii tele tene pa shawur mado. Rawa du drube shacho lojo chi yo na ko su tene di shacho re samsa chugurwa, o tende truye yo mara sungu she yo ra. Pari la tene suri la tene pari jogbo yinbe pension teme do chuba yo amare se shonu ge chata ta shar no chang lo chibwa ta shen la so ba ya te den da ta se de ngara zu ngade jin ngara da se ra samgira na se shenda ka ga shen de so kenzu shenda ka ga shen de so ra ta poje do ze ge ya so nga samgira lo za ge nga samgira kire Ani pajo de ngazo ya shen si samgira. Nga samyate, nga chibu nga samgitwa, nga samgimado. Nga rawan tu truba chune, mi shenda tane nga tane, nga samgimidwa. Tana ngombo rishtona, mi su tane, ti ngombo re samsa tengitwa. Tina shi nga tane, shenda tsam simjen tamje ki shen si yungura. Nga rangi nga si tagitwa. Shenda le shen stagara, shenda samaga kora so de nga samsa tagara mado, nga le shen stagara. Nga sede nga razu shuk gyabche samgi yorde, sosu chibu samgi do mado, shenda samal de shen re de toa. Rawan do drube nga chi yone, nga rawan do drube chi na, sui tena nga le de nga samsa samguru de samgi me doa, shen samgi doa. Sezan ko loe wange, tanya je wange, shagi ro mado, yu koran ngone, Rawandu truba says, Nga says, Rawandu truba chiona, the sutena tela ngawanyamba lokigre, tikigmado asagara. Takanga tuture, Tanya Joang Shagiore, Tanya Joangal. Anekadres, you are yella Penjute Nese, Shanum Gichoda, Dashan La Sokbaya, Dedan Dalasa, Meda Tuada Bukudan Debru Jobaya, Penji, Tebada, Tadeshi Burwa, Mede Tue Judas, the Kotua Chigusa, Tue Jushagura, Tue the main Debudes, the May Tua Chigusa, Debu in Bashagura, Debulatene, Jew in Bashagura, Jew in Balatene, Debu Givashane, Jew in Bashagura. Judan Jebu Penzu Tony to the Esonga, and I'm young as Jebu Julete, but the Kang shake out of the mouth. Judy Jebu Tony Shaguresti, Shake Marish and Dagger. Go under Tedan Meda to what we had Judan Jebu Jobaya Penzu, Tebata, Meranging all Sashi Segba, that to a Juimba, Maying all Sashi Segba, that to a Juimba, that Sekshe Bushi. Chi segne ko mere sashi sekbare sekje re se shagore do sekje bhishin le tene sekba shagore me shagore sai sekba merang ngo bada sekje bhishin le tene juba ma se shinya bhishin se de ya me le tene ko bhishin shagore sora no me ka sore juba ma se bhishin ya me le tene juba jo bese Debu Chula Tebar Masa Choyan Debula Tune Tuba, can you Lulan Chogo so there? Debu Chula Tebated Namjusame Shera, and the Capso, Tuti and Debula Tune Tuba the Ese, could you invite Debu the Kebeshane Chushaku or Deba she buried the
So here, then again, there's this kind of mutual contingency that we can see. So they then reveal these things to be dependent arisings that are posited as interdependent or mutually dependent. For example, dependent on the far hill, we posit the near hill, and dependent upon the near hill, we posit the far hill. So here again, when we have like that mountain over there, and we don't even have to use mountain or hill. It could just be over there and over here. These are things that are not intrinsically established as this is here and that is there, or like that is not always the far hill. It's contingent, it's dependent upon where we are when we are positing that. So if it were the case that something had that kind of autonomous existence as being, say, the far hill, then whoever would look at it, wherever they are, they would see it as the far hill. It would be identified as that. But that's not the way that it actually exists. It's the case that it instead depends upon where we are. So it says they exist interdependently, but do not exist otherwise as such. It is the same with east and west, self and other, and so forth. So here we might think that, well, like something like the directions are definitely sort of intrinsically established. The east is where the sun rises. But again, this depends upon where we are. There isn't one spot, one place that we can point to and say that is intrinsically autonomously east, or this is autonomously west, but rather it depends upon where we are. And so this, again, is the way that things are posited in this kind of contingent or mutually dependent, interdependent sort of way. So too it is with self and other. It is the case that we all, in relation to ourselves, like I as the translator think I, and I'm looking at you guys and think other. And so too, if it were the case that that thought of I were somehow that me were intrinsically autonomously established as that, then whoever saw that, whoever perceived that would have to think me or I, but we don't. Each individual thinks I in relation to themselves, and then looks at others and thinks other. And that is something that is contingent, that is dependent upon our particular position. It's not like sort of something that is blue, where whoever looks at it is like, oh yeah, that's blue. The idea of self and other is really dependent upon where we are. We don't look at another and think I, but we only think that in relation to ourselves. However, if it were the case that that were somehow autonomously, intrinsically, really, truly existent as an I, then whoever observed us would have to think I. So here it is, again, a case that things are mutually dependent, are mutually established by the force of designation. It's only by the force of designation that we can establish I or self and other. And so too, when it comes to establish such things as fire and smoke to be cause and effect is also done on the basis of their being mutually dependent. The fire's nature being hot and burning and its being the cause of smoke is established in dependence upon the fuel and smoke respectively, just as firewood is established in dependence upon fire. So here it is the case that we say fire is the cause of smoke, and therefore they are dependently established in terms of cause and effect. But when it comes to the prasangika position, they would actually say that not only is the effect, say in this case the smoke, dependent upon the fire, but the cause itself, that fire, is dependent upon the smoke. It's this kind of mutual contingency or dependency is the nature of cause and effect. So therefore, the consequentialist prasangikas assert that not only is the effect dependent on its cause, but the cause is also just established in dependence upon its effect. So, for example, we can posit fire, something that is hot and burning, on the basis of firewood, on that kind of fuel. But we can only posit fuel if there is fire. So, in that way, it's not just that the effect is dependent upon the cause, but the cause is actually established in relation to the effect. And this is a unique kind of assertion of the Prasangika school. Rinpoche nga kogi min du tanda. Shaba di segi na. Oh, tanda jison.
Oh, yeah. That's the Dorian Chixele, so now drop off it. Oh, Chixele, gender good, strongly. Chixenale. The teacher to the Semashile, you think you turned over number zero. Sema to the schedule to the Semasha, soda. Musum Semacheva, Sema Lunga Semasera. Drawa Latinian, Chichi, Pamini Palanda, Draw Sera. Chin double attended today, but boy, and that in the other. That Sema de schedule turned to Buddhist schedule, the Semalton to Buddhist. The Dajan Pensuton, the Trouble, Samada Yuna, Shazet and Daton Jula, Shazet and the Yuna, Samadaton Julius. Samada Shazet, you only you Trubani of a Madrese. Oh, that is a word or summer. Shetan Buddha Bali Diligence. Love Sanjay Yankarava. Buddha Bali Diligence. May Bas, Pensu Turbale, Pushin Latun and May and a militant Pushin Shago, or Shedan. Ranjit Chavan Legend. Dipen and Dijun Pese. Dipen Dijun se, Petelia, Rumbuyana Tongu Shatura. Tongu Juna Teleto de Dijangadus, Rumbu Shatura. She does such a manico touch it to Rumbu Imbachida, touch it to Tundu Imbachico, Rawando Trubachi or Madisungora. Dipen and Dijun and Petela Rumbuyana Tongu Gudese. And Dikipen and Dike Perse. Dike Beshin and Dike Besher. Marme version or so. Marme Keba de Teletany version good is. Those are the June stretching is to good is on Gara. And they got show some cheddar, not you shira. Oh, the shit answer. What about the children?
No. So here then in Chandrakirti's Clear Words commentary to the fundamental verses on wisdom by Nagarjuna, he states that therefore the four valid cognitions establish knowledge of the world's object. So here the kind of four valid cognitions, this is referring to direct perception, inference, sort of analogy and verbal renown or verbal testimony. There are sort of different ways of listing those, but those are dependent upon their their object of knowledge. And so too, that object of knowledge is dependent upon the valid cognition. So they too are interdependently established. Once valid cognitions exist, they have their objects of cognition. Once the objects of cognition exist, they have their valid cognitions. Both valid cognitions and object of cognition are not established by their own intrinsic essence, but rather they are mutually dependent, interdependent in this way. And so too, Buddha Palita's self-titled commentary says, it is like this. Due to interdependence, there is fire independence upon firewood, and there is firewood independence upon fire. So here again, getting at the idea that the cause is dependent upon the effect, and the effect in turn is also dependent upon the cause. And so too, from Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, it says, when this is, that arises. When, like short, when there is long. Due to the production of this, that is produced, like light from the production of a flame. So here is something like long or short that is intrinsically existent is impossible. Something isn't just sort of long in and of itself, singularly long or singularly short, but rather these are dependently designated kind of phenomena. When something is in relation to something else can be posited as long or can be posited as short. And so too, when it comes to the production of something, the effect arising from a particular cause, these are mutually dependent.
Oh yeah. Oh, chida. Dan do debale sanje kan do kapso songdo. Kala londe de zambuli chadan chalu de songora. Kala londe se. Namga tongba chiria ani londe. Tela tenene chui pombo chong. Tela sajin de jo. Te chui pombo de yo ala tene sajin bu de chong sara. Tela sajin de tela roa de se. Te sa todo chase de tela tene roa chi simjen soja dan meda tendula soba kanga yungu orno. Ten se simjen lela chui be kyunin de rades. O tesu sangma de yongye kyu de karasan nangbo tongbo chignalia. Sato ji tesha yordo o tesu kanga de simjen ki ko lele teni chungu yore sungu yora simjen lele chube simjen ki lege wang ko ne ji te long che de chu tele ya long che ba simjen de chu ne de dung her nyang che de gu yordo o simjen lele chube kyu ne de de namga kang la ne ten de sambar kes lege wang chi ne ba chi yore sti karasna namga tongba chiga namka tongba chiga na sato don zambul de chachi de yora o de lege wange neba yoyo pado ko ani sato do de te to gure ti mena ni ko parujile shi dure se lege neba so so na namga kangla ne tende sambar ki se te do de che te jeba chi doa te nyam do lo shan chi bor se lobe senge sambu tiba chus cheben jeba chidwa lobe senge sambu khara tina karson do sana khala she chawala so somde khala long den se tera pena jigden chakba na se rimba shindo ten des chikchila ten rimba shindo chugure se namga tongba tela ani long je ten gi ware se long do cheba le ani chui pongbu de yong yore se tela yang sergin do tene chudi yo la tene sashi sergin do jan sa sebura chabi be kajirdo sergin do jan ge sashi chare sora tela yang sachin buti ga ne sachin buto do kambu de chare se tela lingshi be ji den chade tela de shacho lojo nocho chancho cheje ko choshilya lingshi chare so do tene semjen ge longju chade ne semjen ge longje ya Rwa saya tongya konya la sokpa suyo ne chi tuzu long che ne rimji ya kangpa gyagi che kanga yungu wardo. Tene rimji long ju cha de se. Tendra de tsawe kyu le yinbar shebar chawayo. Tsawe kyu de ko le la tene kyawa nga me le che senti le ko le ga che chawa che ne lunga yisungi chawa che ne chungu yordo. Yar che chin tanda nga zu Zambuli namla pi chuola zu mi tongdra mambu sere che kanga yungdo atazu kanga kanzu rimbe severe sigora ya kawari simjengi lonchu cha de se Tendra de Sawe Gule in Shebarche, Shebarchao. Shendo Nango Tamje in Betsenich, Nanga Chitter Nesios, Nella Sobachi Simjan and Drawachi Mana, Nanga Tombatilia, and the Nugin Dentist, near the condition that of Grace and Gora. Shendo Nango Tamje Embe, Novo Tamje Embe, Nanga Tombatil Tori Meba, Chara, Nanga. Chiternes you sat on the Yaten Saganelia, condition you rese. Lungi can go call ne in this, Lung does nego Nangutonga. Mega Meguso, she somebody chinaging then did answer. Tell a long cheva be huge simjet namnese. Naging then the long cheshera, long cheva about the simjetera. Thomas Chalbe doing in a pension, tension there were you but a pension. Naging dandy, Simjang Lalato, Simjanta, Naging Latonia, and Yashin Shakuyono. Tata Miller software soldier nam or Debodochi, yeah,
No,
that's one.
no, hindi siya. So then from the Sutra of the Buddha, it says here, the verse summary sutra states, again, this is the sort of description about how the world comes into being, in this description of the sort of production of the universe. It says here in this verse summary sutra, air depends on space, and the body of water depends on this air. The great earth depends on this water, and beings depend on the great earth. In this way, beings experience their karma. Consider how else would space serve as a base for something. So here in this sort of description of the way in which the universe comes in to beings, it describes that karma is really the fundamental root of all of this. It is due to the sort of karma of beings that the world, the environment that they enjoy, as well as they come about into being. But as it is explaining here, the sort of way in which these are contingent or dependent is then described in the Master Haribhadra's commentary on this verse summary sutra, where it explains, the verse states on space and so forth. For example, this universe evolves in stages that are dependent on each other. Air depends upon space. And so here space is referring to that simple lack of obstructive contact. Air is then dependent upon that lack of obstructive contact. And then that too, the body of water depends upon air. And then the golden earth that is sort of considered the ground upon which our earth is based, then depends upon that body of water. The great earth depends on the golden earth, and the world system comprised of the 4 continents is dependent upon the great earth. Then the resources of living beings form. So on that basis, we then develop up the rest of the world. We can sort of see how it is sequentially built up into the point where we get as living beings into our own sort of building up houses and structures and flying through the sky and all of these other different things that we do. And so this is all then again dependent upon the karma of beings. So consider how karma is the root cause of all of this. How else could space, defined as the absence of all things, or the absence of any kind of obstructive contact, serve as the base? What need is there to mention everything for which air is the basis? So here, in this way, everything is dependent in this sense of the way it is produced, but it's also dependently sort of designated or contingent in the sense that, like, the things that living beings enjoy, the environment and the sort of beings that are within the world are interdependent and interconnected, as it will continue to explain.
Oh, yeah, Tajante, she somebody. She seems to Thomas Dometa. Oh, yeah, Tandina Malasha. Tata Miller Sobe Soldier Nam Sembur Neba Sedwa. Tandangazu Miller Sobe Soldier, Tandula Soba Kanga, Zamlin Dina Neba to Sumbuche Dea de Sigara. Tata Miller Sobe Soldier Nam Sembur Neba Chinangi. Such a melongi Namkata Chevalatene. Chi Nergy Dendi nangene sadan chudan medan lungda namga tongsan la soba tezul tene ne sembuche tegu yore sungo sigora gasore bukan namga dan cheba la tene bukan namga su tongsan dil sigora tongba udan sagibo lungdo sebe sigora namga ngaju takba singe thode mesam bicha namga takba sikel sigora mara chinagi sachu melon namga dan cheba la tene juwa yinla ase tene chuji simchen namne nöjin jikden la tenpata ngaranzu dila long chengenge mida tundula soba tezu kangate nöjin jikden dila tende yore sora di sada chuda meda longda tongsan la soba tezu kuryu sora ta kuryu di yabu mena ngazu neto yomara ngodi satana chindi yomara neto mara chandana chi neto mara ne long do su zama men ne to yo mare u ta de ro o de de ko chi ne ji ne ji de sena da da te le ku ru te le teng re so ra de na chu ge sim je nam ne ji de de le tem ba da ne ji de chen bu de chu pong bu la tem ba da chu ne long ge pong bu la tem ba da long ne tong sa ji nam ga la tem ba yin xin se ne wo men do Shushisha ore, tachanga dere. Temba taase, tachanga dere. Ngogo tamjegi tongbe, tongsangje namga la temba dengi, semjen namje, nebe sashidang ludang longzyo la soba tidu nyowe, ngogo namje tendo tu namshiji padu neba yaase. Tandi zambuli di kaze padu, ngarazu mida tondula soba tsoye tense ne tuba tense ora. Semjen namje lela temba yende ese. Jonga me semjen lela temba re sendela ngarazu chedan dream de le mabusa che kuru meba soya da tendele tengi wara. Temba yende te da ma ina namgandi tada lungla soba neso rungwe shiri chidaran jodi minjurse le dan drene longche baba semjen te zogi le dan drawachi yone yone tanda di nejin chiden de ko longche che shirla ne de yore so wara. Teta semjen nambi le ne nichu jin chiden je sawe juyin ba songla sa. Nangba chene le le chiden naso che sira. Semje le sanghe mambu je sa tele tene susu longche cha tidu nyowe tendo ya longche cha saya toya konya la soba tezu chugu yor no. Semje nambi le ne nejin chiden je sawe juyin ba songde tena. Tende la rangi ngo namjo shen la deba da rangi pari tsuri la deba se rab tende doa tende da se kebar shen la deba se di ngobo de kewa de kyudan ken la tende kewa da tende sha doa tende takbe tende se ro tende kebe tende so o tende namba ni na la tende son shegde ya tende stiba to chi ya tende chibora son de ko mangzi lapshana ke ya.
So here then again it says that living beings, thus the world's environment and the beings that use its resources have all been interdependent and interconnected right from the beginning of this world. At the present moment, too, the fact that all beings, humans and so on, are alive is dependent on the external and internal elements, earth, water, fire, air, empty space, and so forth. So living beings are dependent upon their environment. So too, all of the sort of elements that make up that kind of external environment, those internal and external environments. And the living beings that inhabit this world are dependent on this world's environment. The great earth that is a part of this world's environment depends on the body of water, which in turn depends on the great mass of air. And so in this way, all of these things are sort of mutually established or mutually dependent. This air then depends upon empty space, and the empty space, the mere absence of all things or any kind of obstructive contact, serves as the basis for the things that cause beings to experience happiness and suffering, their bodies, the earth and its resources, and so on. So here again, the sort of varieties of things that beings experience really ultimately arise from karma, but come into being in the world due to the force of that karma. So the period of time that it remains as such is dependent upon these beings' karma. If this were not true, the empty space of the present could not become a suitable basis for air and so on. So this citation states that beings' karma is the root cause of the world's environment and its inhabitants. We've seen the often quoted verse from the Buddha, where he says that all of the varieties within the world arise from beings' karma. So this kind of dependent origination is one in which the sort of all of the very world and its inhabitants, all of this environment is dependent upon that kind of empty space, that lack of obstructive contact for its coming into being. And so we can see that kind of level of dependence in terms of something acting as a cause for something else, as well as the kind of level of dependence of something being dependently designated. So as was discussed in this section, there's a sort of mutual dependent kind of dependency or interdependency, as well as that kind of dependent arising of imputing something and that level of dependent imputation.
Oh yeah, this other. Oh yeah, that's an idea. That chunam dakshitan doze latene trupsu said that. Chunam dakshisidu Koran Laksaga Shichiwara. Kambarina Koda Kegunda Togana Chikarina Chashe Chungro. Dogesidu Lotel Siwara Strada. The Kambari Sarah. Joshi Stadeta. The Kamba Onyambe Lonitel. Tayatanya, the Loitanya Singudwa. So Chunam Dakshidan Dojigi Tanya Latenese. Dojigi Tanya. Doji Latene. Trupsus Tishegdwa. Chu Kandeginere, Tatanda de Salu Jangba, Sitil Ten Sharmadoshe, Namdula Sobarwa, oh, Tene, Kansada. Nimine Shingdalichan, Pechan Shegdo, Shingdas de Color Cheche, and Tache, Miche Titani, Rudusan, Shingdas, Shignies, Yomado, Tatin Sadan Namduda, oh, Tesulichana, Teleja, Lelandua. Salu Jangba days, Rangi, that's Salu Jangba days, Rangi, Sabin, John Chimbushi, and Puganamba, Mahatabi Sabin Yorno, and then John Chimbushi, Sakore, Chukore, Longcore, no True Corridor, such a melon John Chimbushi, Sai John, May John, Chu John Chimbushi. Chida Puganamgase, Puganamgase, Tongsan, Ya Kesa, Ya children do such a Tongsan Kuyora. Tilapoga Namwasado, Tongba. So, Jurachangi Chashe Kone, Kukin Chirile, Chatuma Sobaker, Kokidusa, such a melon, Juan Namka Tongsan, that she but the Mambuja Touch, then the Akikudes, Sobati Akikudes, Kukin Soba Mambul, then Kikudes. The Dasalu Jamba de Kiwanayako, Chashe Chikan. This Salu Jamba is a chicken yankee, Marco Cado, the Yibna, and Roa Nichi to Chasha Mambuyoto, to Mambuyora, Chicken Joe, my chickens, the chicken ya, Chami chicken ya, Shanda, Robomego chicken yanchi, the Chamisera, Shiba Kaji Chamisera, Tinashi, Chami chicken yankee Maris, Cocado, the Yibna, to Mambutsone. The Mad Mambuyora, or Chigando gave a my embarrass. Chiribe Soba Konaki, Soba Chicken with the Eswara. Then there was Soba Chai to Reva, Tati, Solu Jambang, the young get it to Renepa session, and the Jamba is a chill to Ege or Marto. Oh, 근데 속배 차에 뒤를 와나 속바다 카도다 입을 속바 찍려야 뒤가 맞다 속발을 때네 속바디 멤버 가르스는 속발을 때네 아니 뒤파 따고요다 뒤에만 보지 속발을 때네 아니 뒤치레스 그냥 낙세르지네 마부지 속발을 때네 뒤 낙세레스 간사로지네 풍부한 속발을 때네 뒤 미리세 파다고요 저 속바디를 말해 속바디 닥시레 되어 말도 닥치래요 말해 예, 살리 장바 마레서 속바데 마엘라스 차셰 대달에 마도베 에네 뭐 셴드나 살리 장바 셴다제 요 마도 차셰도 파샤네 셴다제 용싱 마로 아니 살리 장바 메르세 메마레세로 대다나야 살리 장바 때다 메다 카도다 입다 데졸레 테네 디 살리 장바레세 당부 사부타베 선다 쳬바 데졸레 텐진 데네코 아니 살리 장바 스파타고도 또다 메다 로 카도다 입비 차도마 남 딱실체네스 대시체네 디살리 장바레세 파타그레스 다디나시 참아 뭐 강가치 보러 디싱도르 쿠시 동보레세 데 암기 동보레세 로 강가 가르네들 탄년도베시 인신세 살리 장바시 탄년다고 대sam게 살리 장바 유주 조바레세 델 살리 장바레세 다가 타초사르 탄년도 유주데 다체바체케요 말에 다체바치게 되나 아니 단단바 투마투세 체바치요라 다도 데마신 바 살리 장바 셰탁베 탄 살리 장바데 가인시세나 아니 다시나 차셰레 셴칸도 살리 장바 신이기요 말에서라 되네 아니 살리 장바 살리 장바 랑게 차셰다 도체레 테네 주베 텐디레 스타트다 강가 치고라 탈마부셰서서 게데 다시 차셰 가야 롱아시 살리 장바 임바시 니규요나스 티나네 데살리 장바레세 치 차셰르 치 라야 요나스 와라 아니 장바 다시다 도체레 테네 조마임바렌도레 장바데 다시다 다시 차셰다 도체게 탕예 자다 도베 탕예 테네 주바 마르 코라 라와도 주바레노라 다시 차가야 살리 장바에 버시 니주 매장 차셰기 다시레 테네 도체게 살리 장바 오시 딱바 삼빈 장바 요바임베 차셰다 도체 라테네 살리 장바 요라 차셰다 도체라 마덴버 살리 장바 생게체 랑게고 랑오네 주바시 니베 티 고감요 마레시가라 니주 매변 장바 텐션 레버는 좋아하는데 주바 어때보다 지주나
So here then again it says here so turning to this section of how phenomena are established in dependence on their bases of imputation. So here again this sort of when we could use any kind of example but here in this sutra we are using the example of a rice seedling. So the rice seedling is produced just from an aggregation of a variety of factors, composite causes and conditions that are constantly undergoing change. Its seed, the four great elements, the element of empty space, and so on. So any sort of phenomena, whether we could take the example of like a plane, or we could look at a person, or the sort of famous example that they liked to use before was like a chariot or something like sort of a carriage as it's translated here, then none of these things exist from their own side, but rather are a composite of causes and conditions that are constantly undergoing change. And so nothing can be found to be that sort of thing as it seems to exist. So it says here, when the rice seedling is produced, it is produced not as one singular thing, but only as an aggregation of various things. So when we have some sort of effect arise, it's not as though it's just a singularity, but rather it is something that is composed itself of various parts. And so the rice seedling, the individual parts and the aggregation are not the rice seedlings. And there is no other entity, there's no entity other than these parts that is the rice seedling. So basically, we have something that is a basis of imputation. Again, there are those sorts of schools that would assert that there is something that could be partless, like say some kind of idea of partless time, or like partless moments, or partless particles. But when we look within the individual parts of that rice seedling and the aggregation are not the rice seedling, but there's no other entity, or there's no entity other than these parts that we can designate as being the rice seedling. We nonetheless say this is a rice seedling, and we're imputing a conventional term on a basis of imputation that consists of different parts, such as the upper and lower halves, the color, and so forth. So this mere imputation of rice seedling encompasses the ontological status of the rice seedling. When we use our sort of the terminology, or the kind of concept that is behind a term, and posit it as being this mere imputation of rice seedling, that encompasses the entire ontological status, how that thing exists. Not content with just this, however, we search for that which is the rice seedling, the object of imputation of rice seedling. So when we do, we find no rice seedling that is the parts, the bases of imputation, or something other than the parts. Therefore, this rice seedling is a dependent arising that is established in dependence on its parts and on imputing terms and concepts. So here, when it comes to the way in which this rice seedling is established, we can say that there's no sort of, if we were to search within that basis of designation, there's something which has various sort of parts and components, an upper half, a lower half, there's a color, and so forth. And we try to find something that we can point to as being the actual kind of rice seedling. We can't find anything within, like all the way down to the individual sort of particles that exists as that rice seedling, but rather it's something that is merely designated upon a particular collection of causes and conditions. So too, like when it comes to anything else, like a forest, there's no sort of forest that exists in and of itself, or that is that basis of designation, like that collection of trees, but rather it is something that is designated on that basis. So here, this is something where if we are not sort of satisfied with whatever it is, whether it's a rice seedling or like an apple tree or a mango tree, and we try to say, well, we want to find the thing that really exists as that thing, there's nothing that can be pointed to. When we're not content with just the sort of imputation and the level of the imputation, we try to find that thing. But when we do, we find no rice seedling that is the parts, the bases of imputation, or something that is other than those parts. So again, the rice seedling is a dependent arising that is established in dependence on its parts and imputing terms and concepts.
장바 코랑 그냥 차셰 가도다 입다 뜨다 매다 뜨수 뜨테르네 저기 되는 뜨수랑원에 두고르스노 뜨수 집버레세 뜨수랑게 차셰를 뜨신 두고르마도 라와도 두바치 요 말에세 가도나라 요 말에 입나라 요 말에 뜨다 매다 뜨테르르르 제테나 요 말에서 라와도 두요 말에세 장바랑게 차셰 뜨매다 가도 소냐 라랑게 차셰게 닥시다 도질에 때네 주바 인세 대다르 차치네세 네 타마 뒤처럼 장베베 뒤처럼 충주주르네 바다제 치기나야 차셰던 도질에 때네 주바마도 차셰를 때메고네 주바치요 말에서 대다르 차치네 타마 뒤처럼 진짜와시 예론스베 충주 따니라 랑게 모네바 데세도 초 타데베 샤노소 뒤지 모네바이나 샬로 노브찬라 소바코 지 뒤뒤체스나 지질리 팀메드와체 카가데 투베치 요구레스요라 그때 참미 지부 양가로와 니 미시바인세 뒤 로딜이야 뒤에 참미 세고 말에 참미 요나네 라완도 투바치레로 거라 그 수치를 때뭐 그런 장장야 요토고라 지시르나 뒤 인천제 랑게 다시 차시지 요거래 디메나 뒤에 투수는 찍버린도 그렇고 철철로 하면 전부리 쌈두고 말해 이 진짜랑게 dakshi toma tang dokche le to ne trup ko ba yin se tena lo de la tuden chame misi ba ya tu yin chen je tai jin de ba jong wa yin ko ba ne ki ten ju ya lo le tuden chame yo ma de so re ya ho ti ba to chi ju na
So here, sorry, I think I forgot a little bit of the English. If any one part of the basis of imputation were found to be the rice seedling itself, it would be incorrect to assert that the rice seedling arises independent on the basis of imputation and the imputing terms and concepts. However, none of the parts can be found to be the rice seedling, and yet the rice seedling does exist by mere imputation of rice seedling. By imputing the term and concept to the basis of its imputation, its parts. Therefore, the rice seedling exists independent on its parts and its imputing terms and concepts. We cannot identify the rice seedling as existing without depending on its parts and imputing terms and concepts. So we establish the rice seedling to be a dependent arising. So some of this covers the same kind of material again. So here, just as the rice seedling is established in this way, in dependence on its parts, so too the individual parts themselves, the upper and lower portions, the color, and so on, are established in dependence on their basis of imputation, their parts, and the imputing terms and concepts. So if after dividing parts into parts in this way, you were to arrive at some microscopic particle, this particle, providing it has an identity, will certainly have multiple sides, such as east and west, and depend upon many other particles. So for this reason, consequentialists assert that it is impossible to have a partless, indivisible, solitary particle. So here again, as long as something is established as a particle, it must be established by way of imputing terms and concepts and the many parts that are the basis of imputation. So here, according to the consequentialist system, then the impossibility of a partless particle establishes all particles to be dependent arisings. So if it were the case that we had something like a rice seedling that existed independent of its being mentally designated by terms and concepts, then would have to exist in its own right. Or so too, if we were to find something, point to something like, say, a partless particle that exists in and of its own right, it would have to exist independently or in isolation, which is an impossible way for things to exist. And so too, if one is to try to assert that there are partless particles, there becomes the problem of how then would those particles aggregate? If you can't point to any one part or one side of that particle, then how is it going to touch with or meet with, connect to other particles in order to have an aggregation that creates the gross kind of world that we have? So anything, as long as something is a particle, it must be established by way of its imputing terms and concepts and the many parts that are its basis of imputation. So here, establishing that the thing imputed is not its basis of imputation. And so too, that there is, according to the Prasangika system, in the impossibility of a partless particle, such that all matter, all particles are established to be dependent arisings.
Oh yeah, do Sarah. Oh yeah. Oh, that sure can get you better. 당간 주디 동반이 세대 최치기 동반이 내주 거야 우신선은 담제 집어래 시기 따보 강에 버더니 권지 따보 있어라 내루 타두디 최치기 등에 내루 타두도 거야 우시라서는 상마 집어 지냐래 내루 타두는 담면돼요 말에 최전 고랑은 담면돼요 어너 미래 라레 라마레 따르 신다르 신담면돼요 어데 제 동배 차들이야 동당 동루대 집어래 되어라 어디인데 최치기 돌려고 심부시는 강갈치 버려. 야 동반이 삼루단에 소소롤 때보면은 동반이 삼루 마다는 데라. 강상 가실이야. 당미 템발에 다 여바 템바데 야 요송세요르도. 당미 템바 마이세 다도 강사들라. 다 템바데 초트 주바데세. 안고 체달 후에 다 메데 연구에 송거라. 어디 기분 정기다 전부 nyamu sayata, nyamu pasata chedo, ene tongpa kongudwa, kansa tami sui tami. Kibu chung dula tami koban tobalia, tongpa nyeke kongumedwa. Ti sonza. Chigi tendo yabuchi za chunani, shenda kanga chibu yin samti ha kogura. Taandra china, pumbu nga yora, sopu chiduwa, sopu le chashe mambu yora, lakwa kangpa nalo da che, chilo da che pe, tutenpe, bumbra da changa che mewda chi yora, sopu tele. Tene se sem chiduwa, sopu le tene, sem de loga shagra, sopu le tende yore, tanda sopu sem ki ten chigi yore. Ko nipa tso sunani mi samlu tegi mato, ngana shintu tu kali che mi samlu kanga yendu yora, ki sopu degi sem ki ten chigi yo mato. Tanda ngana sopu de sem ki ten chigi yora, ti indi number shiba, migi number shiba, nawe number shiba, ne number shiba, che number shiba, luki number shiba kanga doga, migi yagu chaga chigi yora, ta ngana migi doji, loya shita le sunu ko lega maja ne migi number shiba yon eke yo mara. Ko mangbo zili tete yora, number shiba che. Ene namshe degi tanda yu tsoregi, tsora kenbu dowa, yu kandechi no odi yabu do, di yabu mendo sami tsoa dewa ki, kashe tunga ki, kashe tangim ki debi tsoa chi dowa. Yu kandechi tongsuna degi sosu lusimle pembe tsugi chi tongsuna dewa tsorgu yore. Sosu lusimle nebe tsugi yu di nyongu dono tunga tsorgu yore. 소수 lösümle keba mebe sögi yedi tsodunu tsoa tanyum sigwara. Yungara sheba nane mangshi sura ta kimshi sura kasoti tsoa de yungare. Yukande ngara su tata korande kumshi wangi kare kim yangare kardo tuare kardo tindreje tatin kirishide de yora. Dini tsoa de shukchimbi shochi wara. Tsoe tondali ane jiktenba tsoe da tezu kanga ti yungare, tewe chagin tuwe tungin se ti tondalia nyokta kanga choba kanga yungare. Soa ti do ti chita chita misu chobe shira chi, chagda ki shira tine yungare. Dushi yan dushi jinduwa, trawan zima o di chi chi rishan di teta tirin dushi bade mena ane ka soa mengen sundu chandura. O di miresha, o di chingwambure, di seven, di chi yakbureshan, di yakbure medusam dushi bashidwa. O di chi pungbuchira. Di ngarazu mangchiwa tsoba yongayata, tawi tolo tsoba yongayata, di samlu tangda rabendra shane yungwara, dushi kitona tsoba tsong, o di tinde samlu tangda yawma noro resara. Tinde samlu tangda yangdagbara noro yawma resara. Tinde samlu tangda dushira, tsoba bung dushira. Duji ki pungpo sidi yule sembar cheba, yule ba sembar cheba laya sikrati laya. Yule ya sembar cheba laya ta, tezo ki dikdila nyamu kondo nga je chado la sawa tezo dikdila duji ki pungpo sikidwa. Ta tanda chashe dhaba nga yora nga zo. Tila teni ane taa sapa taa yora. Pungpo nga po te kauru le teni. Chilo ne paa tene mangsha sobo le tene taa tagro o tashi resha, tenru resha, mi resha, taa resha, pala resha stagdwa. Ane soso ngone paa tagwe ne mangsha de soa daa o tiri nga yabudu, de yabu mendo samda. Samlu tanda de nor shasen, de nor mendo saro. Nangi shibe chane paa tagwa mangsha yungdo. O te indi pumbu nga yuwa de pumbu nga mado mendo atina, mando gechi mendo a. Tele tene, pinga nene re ne ta mare sigara. Sobu da yene ne sobu chashen goda kangbala ba re ne da yen guren ta ma bu shu chagra. Soso re yo mare, sem de ta re yo mare. Ta uma tengyo lu chen ta. O de de pumbu nga la tene pa ta ba. Tashi tendu siri mi ka ga ne ta ba ro. O di ta ba sam ge ni ta yin ba sha gore. Tanye de ju zo ba re. Tene ta ba sam sigro. Sobureji kudyo kyabdone, kane chishe semgisa chishegdono, ko chishegdo sida, tene tabara, te semgu chisheba shagora. 다시행게데 가반도 세트데 제요 말에 타녀도 유줄이 세번 마치셔라 직내 타녀 유줄이 마다 마셔버 코란을 샤야다가 샤오래 지dembe 타녀데 세번 직대는 니에요 말에 니에면은 지dembe 타녀 간거 시도래 매번 잘로래 야 뒤지 주나 뭐 재미있었어 언제가
So here, then when it comes to this kind of understanding, that when all phenomena are empty, and when we are able to realize this kind of truth, this reality in relationship to one phenomena, we can extend that then to understand it in relation to all different phenomena. So although conventionally things are different, we can talk about the horses and houses and humans and so forth. When one has come to understand that kind of the way in which phenomena don't have this kind of ultimate existence or are empty of that, we're able to sort of move that understanding from one thing to the next. But there are some people who, when hearing about emptiness, they fall into a kind of nihilist extreme, that there's absolutely no self. So it's not necessarily the teaching for everybody, especially right from the beginning. It's said that it's better for some individuals to hear about a self, to hear teachings on a self, if the alternative is them falling into some kind of nihilistic extreme where they deny karma and so forth, where they just think that nothing whatsoever exists. So in order to be able to gain liberation from samsara, we absolutely have to understand emptiness, to be able to get rid of our afflictions from their root and so forth. But just to gain a higher rebirth in the future as a human or a god, someone doesn't need to have the understanding of emptiness. So for certain people where they are in the path, certain practitioners, it's actually better not to necessarily teach them selflessness or emptiness right from the beginning, because that then could be sort of a downfall for them. So when we come to sort of beginning to investigate in this way how it is that phenomena exist, when we say, for example, take the sort of human, take our person, we have a body, and most of the time we designate like, oh, that is so-and-so on the basis of that body. But we are not just our physical body. It's not as though the person is their body, but rather there's also the kind of mind, and our mind is constantly changing. Our consciousness, our 5-6 consciousnesses use this body as a support. They sort of continue as long as that body continues, but it's not as though we can pick one of these things and identify it, point to it as being, oh, that is the person. And it goes beyond just the sort of aggregate of form and the aggregate of consciousness to those of feelings. When something appears to us in a way that is beneficial or helpful, that brings a feeling of happiness. When something appears threatening or somehow like it's going to be harmful, that brings about a feeling of suffering. And something towards which we are indifferent, we sort of give rise to this kind of ignorant or indifferent sort of feeling. And so examining then again this basis of designation of the self or the I, we come to the next of the aggregates, that is discernment or distinguishing. So here, when we have some kind of person, again, we're identifying the sort of most important elements, that is what composes the 5 aggregates. And here then we have, after feeling, this kind of discernment, being able to sort of like distinguish, allows us to distinguish or identify things like this is this as opposed to this is that. And so this kind of discernment or discrimination is another element of the kind of person. And then we have the sort of karma, the kind of karma that we have committed in the past, and the various kinds of afflictions that that karma arises from. So when we look at this sort of set of the 5 aggregates, these various things, we can see that independence upon designating a person on the 5 aggregates, we can speak about a person or an individual as self, but that's really the extent of their existence, that dependent designation, that sort of using terms and concepts in order to impute this is that, or like saying, oh, this is this person. That completes it sort of culminates that level of existence. There is nothing beyond that. If we were to try to find within any of those individual parts something that we could point to and say, oh, that is the person, then they would have to exist in a way that it's not dependent or not sort of contingent upon anything. But when we try to engage in that kind of analysis, we can't actually find anything that exists in that way. We can't locate something that is beyond the sort of worldly term, that mere designation that we have given. So here, this when it comes to understanding emptiness, it really is about understanding the unfindability of this thing when we search for the imputed object within its basis of designation.
Cheba Chigio Mari, Chen Jidan Tanya Tanda the Landu, they said, Shatu Mari said, Chitan Jidegi Tanya Tanya Cheba Majisio Mara, Madu Mirachi Chalarajilane, Tisuki, my Dr. Chen, Cheba Chegura, Chimgan Tuche, Dicare, Digara, Dimar, Tadi Reshase, Chalari Seguina, Marabadu said, Cheba Majisio Mara, Nizungune Kari Cheba Chegura. Chiracha de Trashis the Suina, Sahamagon, Tirin Mitra, the contrashi derida, Sasana, oh, yeah, that Trashi de Bursa. That Trashi Kares, Chebachema, Trashi Mohako Sadra. Two Sadus, that Trashi Kares, Chagandona, Dinia Yomare, Tanya Dinia Yomare. Then a talk was on the shower. That kind of case shake on the Trashi Kitty shake do say, Lapanagton Trashi not to do Segura. And somebody given all the shitty give Desha, or didn't cause some give Medusera. Pumbunga de Chachi, the Koyaga, do a Chachi, Trashi Deva and Metewachi, Sonia Giora. Or take some Lia Shago, or Anjine Tanya. Tanya do you better that Tira. But they more the Ratsani and Yadi Caresi chair or Mare, or compared to Kawai, or compared to Resha sitting on Sasson, don't do Sarah. That and then they on Gomba Kagire Sig, the name is Semba de Medusegra. Semba de Omega, Tagan Chimbachora, Dribachora. Chidembe Tanya de Ran Samason, Simbache, Tagan Dribache, in that saucer. Then meet the combatant do ta do dose, Tanagdose, then a talk was on the shower. Oh, did it, then a talk was some reset. Tangaranzo Samluna Teo Mare. Garanzo Samluna Langasia de O, Pumbunga Litene, talk was some yet to Legacy de Tagachache, Samro Chigmare, Nangarangachi, Tandachi, Rangune, Rangzu Tubachi, Tasubachi, Subachi. Not there you do said she gave no Shergadua. Tell her Rangune to her Zimbasua, Rama to draw. Pumbu Danteso, Ding a Sopora, Ding a Semra, Ding a Sorot in the Sunday. A Corantilla loss of the Logai Vesorata. Ramachene, oh, Tilia, Rama to True some Sigara. Then a talk with some Lutu unit in the Ransamlu, Rangune to be some Shukshabu Medua. Oh, teacher, the Rangune Yuna Sigara. Rangune Yuna dading us around what you Nataka did as so go sem that so on Dushi Mara till a loss of your Vesana, till a loss of your Marwa. Oh, touch and Rama to do it, Dadi Mido Asam, Kitong Gora. The Dadi Yima said the Tanya de Betadi, Yogo Chosare, Tateneta was some Yoga de Yoga Kochura, Tagazore, Tanya de Yore. Tangazu Samlin de Mara, Rama the Rangune Truba, Rangan Truba. Rangan Truba Nanshi, some Giordi, Tonish, Temba in some Giora. What did the Momara Dase? Rangune Truba Yuna Takabandose. Tasuba Sobo de Mara, Sem de Mara, Soa Mara, Dushimare. That tell a loss of yours and tell a loss of your marva. Oh, tell you at it, Tomban yesterday. Soso de Namju Sosu Samba Nashira Rigmedoa. Oh, did Namjunga Dende Samgur, Tati Nashimedoa, some to an assembly. Emanation is some long hands and shook some with the day marva. What in it, Tomban yes, oh, the dish is shagdoa. Tati Nation tells how the Namduda. Computer that is some ton that 레라도와 남도 투즈나 그 잘라 가져가지 마신 페이지 동다 이기라 따르다 진담을 치료 박바다 머신디지 셔버지 어라 대소 레레레네 레디오 말데 가서 하고 더 남도면 대소 속바데 레디오 말에 속발을 때는 남도 따게 열어봐 속바데 낚시래 근데 저 가게 내가 챙게 필통게 대통게 마 대통 야자 통게 근데 챙게 자와 챙게 들라 속바된 게 양아 뜻을 남도 따게 열어 뒤에 따뜻해서 따뜻해 로스 남도 지어버스네 요 말아 텔 로스 로가 남도 지어 말아 로스 따뜻할 때는 남도 맹다래 다 남도 벨기도 하세 남도 밥송하세 남도 쇼바르지 껴세 남도 껴세 도와세 다가 샤오라 마도 라와도 가서 남도 시도치 자와쟁게 미세 코나 랑위네 수 자와쟁게를 주에 삼고도 어떻게 요 말와 때네 따고서는 남도 샤고요 또 다 랑위네 주에 남도 시는 다 가들에서 제거라 따도 제서라 내는 남도 차셔를 내 말을 telelooso yo 말에 근데 라와도 주에 남도 벤두섬 때네 따고서는 남도 레샤서 어디 삼고고라 어디지 두두실람나
So here, if we begin to examine the conventional, the phenomenal, then it kind of breaks down. If we're searching for the sort of ultimate existence of something beyond it's being merely dependently imputed or dependently designated, then that kind of examination becomes problematic. We can't actually find the thing. But this isn't sort of saying to us that we shouldn't investigate things conventionally. Like say someone steals something from you. It's not saying like, oh, well, don't investigate or examine that because there's no point to it. Rather, you should try to figure out who stole your thing, who maybe you go to the police or you search and you're able to find those sorts of things. Or if we are like, say we don't know a particular person. And so we ask, well, who is Tashi? What are the sort of characteristics that Tashi has? That kind of level of conventional analysis and investigation is not is useful on the level of the conventional. If we don't have the sort of sense of what Tashi looks like or who he is, then we can't identify him. We can't say, oh yeah, I've met Tashi or I've not or whatever. So it's when we then are searching beyond that kind of conventional level of existence, we're going beyond just saying like, oh, that person is talking or oh, that person is happy or whatever it is. And we're trying to find the kind of like essence or nature of that thing. We're going beyond that sort of conventional level of existence. We're not satisfied with things being mere imputations, but say, oh, I really want to find that thing that is designated. So again, this is something where the kind of investigation and analysis, if we don't investigate and analyze, then we can talk about conventions and that level of existence. But if one goes beyond that and wants to try to find that thing in the way that it appears to us, like things appear to exist from their own side. Like we have this sense when it comes to our own I or self in relation to these aggregates, that there is like a self apart from these aggregates that is possessing like this is my form, my mind, my feelings, and so forth. And if we just acknowledge that that dependent designation is a mere designation, it's a dependently originated designation, and we're able to have that kind of level of understanding, our self-grasping will be dramatically reduced. So here, when it comes to what we're talking about in terms of meditating on emptiness, is really searching for, looking, when we begin to search for that thing which is designated and get to that level of unfindability. We've already established through that, like, again, conventional existence is a mere imputation, is a mere designation, and that satisfies that level of existence. We can talk about someone sort of coming and going, someone talking, someone being happy, and all of those kinds of things. But if you're not sort of satisfied with that, and instead think, well, where does that thing really exist? Where is it really? And try to point to it, that's when it becomes unfindable. There is nothing that exists in that way. So it becomes, we have so many options that we can contemplate in terms of trying to find the thing designated on its basis of designation, that is this way of analyzing, looking into emptiness. Like, for example, we can take a plane, an airplane. There are all of these various parts. There's a whole accumulation, aggregation of parts that make up that plane. But when we search for, beyond the fact that it's able to, say, carry people here and there, it's able to fly in the sky, and we try to point to, well, where is it? What is that actual plane, and try to point to something within that collection of parts that exists as the plane. We can't find it. There's nothing there that we can point to that is really that airplane. But on a conventional level, we can speak about, oh yeah, I rode on a plane, I took a trip here, and so forth. It's something that is a mere designation, but when we are not satisfied with that mere designation and try to go beyond that, to try to find that thing that really exists in its own right, or that exists beyond that level of mere designation, that's where we can't find it. And so in this way, we can meditate on emptiness through examining, through looking for that thing designated within its basis of designation, while still acknowledging that those mere designations can exist conventionally, and this kind of ultimate analysis is not negating their conventional existence. But when we go to the level of trying to find that thing so designated and are unable to find it, that is the kind of understanding of emptiness that we're being pointed to here.
Oh yeah, that's so.
No.
Mm.
So we'll stop there for now, as the time is up for today.
Oh yeah.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long lives. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of wholesome's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamyatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Thank you so much, Gen Rinpoche, Tuchiche.
Oh yeah,
Thank you, Katrina, for your very clear interpretation.
oh yeah, that's all.
Tunta Jema Jema.
Let's all. Ah yeah, all this, that.
And for those online, we'll see you next week.